We started with the sign-up page. So far we have only this header. Now let's turn this page into a form. So we will have the fields like the username, email, password, and the button to submit the sign-up request to our application. But first, let's structure our tests. So far we have this test here, and here we have the output like this one. This test description is shown right here. But we will have multiple tests in this test module, and it is better to group them for maintaining these tests. And for that, we have a function of describe. And just like the test functions in describe, we pass the description, and this description, for my case, this is for sign up page. So in this group, we are testing sign up page. And the second parameter is again function. And in this function, we can move the tests in it. And if we save it like this, here we can see this is sign up page and it has sign up header. And we can add multiple describe blocks in the test modules. Just like adding a test function right here, we can add another describe like this. Describe. And for instance, this is for the layout, so I will be grouping them. I will be grouping layout tests in this describe block. And let's move this one into the second describe function. So we have this sign up page, we have this layout in it, and we have this test has sign up header. Now let's add our next test. Again, this is going to be a sign up form, and the first thing we want in this form is to have a field for entering username. So it has username input. Again, we will render the sign up page. Now we are rendering a page, and we will check if there is an input here. This render is returning back an object. So let's say this is let's say render result, and in this render result object we have container render result has this container. So I'm just assigning this container as a variable here. So this container can be seen as the document itself we have on the browser, and it has the functionalities like container, query, selector, and we can query the input element. So we can get the reference to it, and we expect this input to be in the document. So let's save this one. So this is failing. The reason is this query is returning null. So this input is null, so it's not in the document. Now let's fix this one. Let's just add an input right after this h1 to this page. So here on the page we can see there is this sign up header, and we have the input right after that one. And let's see the test result. Here the test is passing. Let's refactor our test. We are taking the container like this. We are assigning the render to render result, then taking the container. But instead of doing this extra steps, we can use the object destructuring coming with the JavaScript. And since this is returning an object, we named it like this one, and we are taking the container from it, and we can shortly do it like this. and that's it. So we are taking the container coming from the result object. By the way, this is not the best way to query elements on the page, because we are directly interacting with the implementation. We are trying to find the exact element in the page. And this has flaws. We will get to that, but let's add our next test. So we have this username input. The next test is just copying this one and pasting here. It has, let's say, email input. If we save this at this point, this test is going to be passing because it is just querying an input and making sure it is there. Let's see the result first. So this is passing, but on page we see only one input element, and that one was for the username we added for the first test case. So this is not a good way to write our test. We can fix it like this. Now we know that there will be multiple inputs, so we can update this part like this one. Instead of querying single input element, we can use like this. Let's say we expect container query selector all. We are querying all the input elements, and let's check the length of it. This is returning an array, and we can check the length of it, and it must be 2. So just commenting out this part. So basically we are rendering sign up page, we are querying the input elements, we are getting all the input elements and checking the length of it, and we expect it to be 2. So saving this one. So this second test is failing because we are expecting to receive 2 input elements, but we received only 1. So the fix is easy. Let's just add another input right after the first one. Now we can see 2 inputs on this page, and the tests are passing. But obviously these are not very trustworthy tests. We will be adding another input for password, and in that case this email input test will fail because there will be 3 input fields on that page, and this test must be updated based on that one. And also on this page we have these 2 inputs, but we don't know what these inputs are about. For solution, for both resolving the confusion on the screen and also for making our tests more predictable, we can use the placeholder for the inputs. So for this one, we can say this is username, and the other one is for email, e-mail. And here on the page, we can see this is for username and this one is for email. Now we can update our tests. Instead of using this container query selector, we can use the query functions coming with the screen. And one of the function is just updating this username part. We can get the screen get by placeholder text, and the placeholder text is username. So this is returning the username input specifically. So this is returning the specific element having this username placeholder text in it, and we expect this input to be in the document. And similarly, let's do the same thing right here for the email input. We expect to get a placeholder text having the email, and we expect this input to be in the document. So this is also passing. Now alternatively, instead of this placeholder text, we can use labels for our inputs. So let's do that. So here for this label input, first one, let's use the label element, and this is having the username text, and the other one is for the label, and this is for email. Now we are seeing this warning, and this is because when we are using a label, we must be making sure it is associated with another element. So that's why we are seeing this warning. Now we are using labels, so let's get rid of the placeholder text. And here on page we have the username and corresponding input, and we also have the email and corresponding input for the email. But the tests are failing because we just removed the placeholder. Now first let's fix this warning. Now let's associate this label with the input. So this label is for, let's give a unique name, and this is for username, and the username is right here. This input's ID will be username. So this label is for the element which has this ID, and similarly this is for an element having the email ID, and the email is right here. And in our tests, now we can get these inputs by their labels, and we can use get by label text, and this label is uppercase username, and same thing for the email. This is for uppercase e-mail. Saving all these changes. So the tests are passing. So in these tests we are trying to access to the elements like a user is doing on this page. So as a user we are finding this label, and we know which input is associated with it. So just like a user does, here in test we are querying the element and checking the existence of it. And with this way we are not paying attention to the implementation details. We don't care about how many inputs are there or what are their orders. We only care if there is anything associated with this label we have here. And if we remove the inputs and leave only the labels here, the tests are going to fail. So both of these tests are failing because this query, this get by label text, is actually returning the element associated with that label, and since there is no any element associated with this label, those tests are failing. So undoing this part to make sure we have the corresponding inputs. Now let's add our next test, and just like these two, we will have a password input. So just copying this test and pasting here, it has password input. And for this one we will have a label of password. Saving this one. So this one is failing. Unable to find a label with the text of password. And here it's also showing the page. We have the sign up, we have label for username and email, that's it. So let's fix this one, just copying and pasting this email label and input. So this is for password, and the password label will have uppercase P. Saving it. Now the tests are passing, and also we can see the password input right here. By the way, these are just added side by side, and if I zoom it here, we can see the username and there's input next to it. Same thing for email and for password. Later we will update the style of the page, but for now let's go with this way. When we type anything to username or email, it is okay to show them in clear text, but when we type anything to password, this must be masked. So currently we are not masking the password input, but this is not something we should be doing in our final application. So let's add a test about it. So here in our test, it has password type for password input. Now we are going to render sign up page, and again we are going to get the password input. Let's copy it from here. So this is returning the input element we have here, and we can do our query like this. We expect this input will have a type attribute, and it's going to be password. So saving this one. So far we try to avoid using the implementation detail in our test, but for this case we have no option other than looking to the exact type property of this input element. So here it is showing the fail reason. We are expecting the input type to be password, but we are receiving text. This is the default type for input elements. So let's fix this one. Here for the input for the password, let's set the type as password. Saving it. The tests are running, but we can verify the behavior on browser. Here, whatever I type here is masked, and the tests are also passing. Now, since we are masking the password, to make sure user enters the password they want, let's add another input for confirming the password. So just copying the tests for the password input, copying both of these two, the existence of the password input and the type of that input. Now this is for password repeat, and we will get it by the label password repeat, and same thing for the other one. So we will have a password type for password repeat input. So saving this one. These two tests are going to fail, and here we can see the two tests are failing, and if we scroll up it is showing this red marker, and both of them are failing. Now let's fix that. So just copying and pasting this password input and replacing it password repeat. Let's update this for and corresponding ID. This is for password dash repeat, password dash repeat, and the type is password. Saving it. Now we have the password repeat here, which is showing the masked input. And here we see all tests are passing. Now let's add our final form element. We will have a button to submit the request. So let's copy our first test. In this one we were looking for an element with this get by role query, and we will do the same thing in this one. Pasting here, it has, let's say it's sign up button, and we are going to get the button, and we will get the button with the screen get by role, and this role will be button, and again the name, the text value in the button will be sign up, and we expect this button to be in the document. So saving this one. So this is failing, we don't have the button. And here in the output, in the failing test output, it is listing what we are receiving when we query the elements based on their roles. And for heading, we are receiving this h1. And for if we would be running the query based on the role with the text box, we would be receiving the input for the username, and the email. So these outputs can be helpful for our test refactoring too. Now let's fix this issue. Now we are going to have a button right here in this page. This is just a button, and we will have sign up text in it. Saving this one. Here we can see the button right here, and we expect all tests are passing. And all tests are passing. Now let's add one final test for this part. Let's make sure the button is disabled initially. Later, we will activate the button when we enter values for the inputs for the password and password repeat. Let's add another test here. Again, copying this sign up button test. So we are querying the page, getting the button, and we expect this button to be disabled. Saving it. So this is failing because the button is not disabled. We are able to click it. We can disable it by setting the disabled property of it. And this is a Boolean property, Boolean attribute, and just using it in the markup is enough to set it as true. But alternatively, you can set the value for it. Whatever we value set for this one is making it true. So just going like this. And now in the browser, we can see the button is disabled. It is grayed out, and we are not able to click it. It is not showing anything about the click activity. And also we can confirm the tests are passing. By the way, since we just copied and pasted the previous test, the description is same. Just make sure you update your test descriptions properly so that later, if anything is failing, if any new thing you introduce breaks the previous ones, you would be able to catch the exact test case with the test description. So make sure to update this part. So in this test, it disables the button initially. And here all tests are passing, and the test descriptions are properly updated. We have all the elements we need for the sign-up request. Currently, don't pay attention to the style part. We will update them too.